Welcome to another Indie Dev Showcase, highlighting the many dev-submitted games and demos we play here on the channel. If you'd like to submit a game for a future piece, please get in touch. And we are starting off with the game Dandy Ace. This was a game we played in I think it was late 2020 or early 21. I forget, it's been a long time. But what we have here is, an attempt at a Hades-like, where we are in an action roguelike, trapped inside a cursed, I believe, a mirror, where our hero, Dandy Ace, has to figure out how to get out, which, of course, is going to involve all the action roguelike goodness. So, as you can tell by the footage, with its kind of isometric perspective, it definitely looks like Hades. But what separates Dandy Ace from that in a very interesting way is that it plays very much like an action roguelike meets Slay the Spire. In the bottom of the screen, you can see that I have different cards, and the cards themselves represent your different abilities. You can have a movement tech card, defensive card, offensive, and you get the picture. And the cards can be found or bought at the in-game stores, and will basically define what you're able to do at any given time. You can also take cards and apply them to your main cards, kind of transferring their passives and their abilities to you. So the game definitely has a little bit more in terms of run diversity in terms of combat compared to that of Hades, where in Hades you pick your primary weapon and then everything that you find augments or changes that primary weapon in some way, shape, or form. Here, your abilities will just constantly change. It reminds me in a weird way a little bit of a Transistor from Supergiant Games in that respect. Now, as with a lot of action roguelike designs, you'll get persistent unlocks in terms of new cards, permanent upgrades, etc., the better you play. With the game featuring multiple paths, and if you want to see everything, you will have to play it multiple times. My main issue that I have with Dandy Ace is that the variance in the level designs themselves just doesn't work. It's not as strong as I would like to see. You really don't want to be fighting a lot of enemies in this game because you'll get very few resources, and each level is on the large side. But we really weren't finding a lot of things. Now, from a general gameplay point of view, because your abilities are going to be defined by your cards, it also means that how you play the game is going to be vastly different. But that can also lead to frustration, as certain enemies are incredibly dangerous to fight in melee, but if you don't have a good range card, well, you're kind of in trouble in that regard. And the game itself, again, it definitely borrows certain elements from popular action roguelikes. And if you haven't played Hades or some of the more outstanding examples, I would probably play them first before Dandy Ace. But all in all, I would say this is a good action roguelike. I don't know if I would rate it as one of my all-time favorites, but if you're completely have gone through Hades and you're looking for a game with similar themes in terms of its mechanics, I would say give this one a check. For our next game, we have the Lunar Effect. This was a demo that's available on itch as well as I believe on Steam. And what this is yet another love letter to the era of 3D survival horror games. We are trapped in a mysterious mansion, something evil is going around, and of course we have no memory as to why any of this is happening. So the demo that we played was a timed one, as you can tell by that lovely little countdown in the upper right, but obviously the real game will not have that. And similar to some of our recent examples, like we played Tormented Souls, Laudium I believe it was called, or Lamantium, I think that was it. The Lunar Effect definitely has that old school feel to it. Unfortunately, with the demo that we saw, there really wasn't any kind of direct combat. It was something spooky happened, you run in the other direction. Puzzles are definitely going for the kind of critical thinking challenges that we see from survival horror games. Look-wise, I think it looks decent. It's not as grainy or as hazy as a lot of other like first or second generation 3D horror games or developers trying to emulate that style. My concern about this one again is just how far are they going to go in terms of the survival horror. Is this going to be a game more about running away, or are we going to be fighting everything with a 2x4 Silent Hill style? So all in all, I would say that if you are a fan of survival horror games and looking for another one to check out, I would say look at the Lunar Effect demo and keep an eye out for the full game when it is released. We now go from horror to something far more lighthearted with Where's Samantha? This is a puzzle platform game where we play as George, this living yarn creature who, as the title implies, has lost his girlfriend Samantha. And in order to find her, we're going to do all kinds of platforming and yarn-related thinking to get through this. So, the key aspect of Where's Samantha is that we can find other yarn textures and more yarn itself that will change George's properties. So, when he has two combined, he goes blue, which means that he will not bounce off of red springs and can push things down. But you can also get additional yarn that will give you other ways of getting around puzzles. And in order to see everything in the level, you need to collect all the letters. And the game makes use of color coding, as you can see, in terms of what platforms can be manipulated, which ones cannot. And in terms of the design itself, I would say that this is on the, I don't want to say casual, maybe like a little bit between casual and moderate side. By no means is this going to be a brutally difficult puzzle platformer. The game is very generous in terms of what you can and can't do. And it has a kind of a delightful feel to it, especially with the kind of yarn aesthetic. If you're not a fan of puzzle platforming, if games like Thomas Was Alone and the slew of indie games that have done this as well doesn't interest you, Where's Samantha is not going to change your mind in that respect. And we kind of ran into an issue that I was hoping for a little bit more puzzle diversity, and we played this for I think it was about like 40 minutes to an hour, and it felt like everything was just starting to run together. Because of kind of how limited the mechanic is, there's only so much you can do to test the player on it. But with that said, I would say for what's here, there's nothing really bad or flawed about the gameplay. And if you are, again, a fan of platforming, I would say give this one a check. So, with that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we got 3 more games to look at for this week's showcase. And as always, if you're interested in my books on design, then be sure to check the following out. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. We now turn to Paradise Lost, and this is a game that it has a very interesting aesthetic and look to it, but we unfortunately just could not find a lot in terms of gameplay. Our story is that it is alternate 1980s, and World War II ended with, well, the apocalypse. We are what we believe to be the last human left on Earth, and we are exploring a mysterious bunker at the behest of our, unfortunately, dearly departed mother. And we are going to have to uncover what happened here, and find, of course, in games like this, any startling revelations about what really happened. So, the game, again, I really like the look of it in terms of kind of environmental design and environmental storytelling of what happened to this place now that everyone is gone. Or are they? Dun dun dun. But the big problem for this game is that from a mechanics standpoint, there really isn't anything. And this will definitely fall more on the, I guess, quote-unquote walking simulator side, rather than as an adventure or exploration game. Each area has a few puzzles to it, and you're going to spend a lot of time just wandering around, trying to figure out where you're supposed to go, and of course doing it very, very slowly. So, all in all, this is one of those games where there really isn't a lot for me to talk about. If you are looking for something that's going to challenge your critical thinking skills and exploration, you're not going to find with Paradise Lost. But if you're looking for an interesting story with some great architectural design, I would say give this one a check. But again, this is not the game that's going to have you doing a lot of movement or really interacting with the space. We now have Genesis Noir. And if I were to rate games solely on their art and aesthetics, this game would probably take home Game of the Year easily. But this is a point-and-click adventure game that involves essentially a kind of cosmic spat between these various beings here. It takes place before basically the creation of our universe. You have No Man, who is in love with Miss Mass, but her jealous boyfriend Golden Boy decides to shoot her with the Big Bang, and could very well lead to the end of all time and space as we know it. And to figure this out, we are going to have to go on a very jazzy, existential, and metaphysical exploration of the universe. So, as you can tell by the footage, the game has style times a million in terms of its look. And the music is impressive. Again, you're not going to be hearing too much of it in this video, unfortunately. But the general gameplay is point and click. And each area has you exploring a different time period or different part of the universe, trying to figure out what you can do to save everybody. Now, with that said, my big problem with this game are the puzzles. This is because of how the game goes through these different universes and different aspects. It means that there is no singular puzzle philosophy. Every area has its own unique things, its own challenges you have to deal with. And because of that, I had trouble with some of the puzzle logic in this game. That, for the life of me, I thought I was doing what was right, but the game was just not recognizing it. And there are no hints or skips or anything like that, which unfortunately hurts the game if you do get stuck. And it is unfortunate because, again, the style of this game definitely carries a lot of the weight here. But if you are looking for more of a modern adventure game, there are titles like Strangeland, the Blackwell series, stuff from Wagi, etc., that is far more accessible and approachable than Genesis Noir. While this game is nowhere near as difficult in terms of like the golden age of adventure games, it definitely feels a little bit more frustrating, at least for me with its puzzle design, than some of the other ones that we've played lately. But if you are looking for a tour de force in terms of aesthetics and style, then you should at least check this game out and just ooh and ah over its amazing look. For our final game in this week's showcase, this is Whisker Squadron from Flip-Fly Games, the makers of Race the Sun and some other titles. The footage that you are seeing from this one is taken from the Kickstarter demo that we played. I believe this was late 2020, but the game was officially funded and it is in development now. And what this is let's take Star Fox and turn into an action roguelike. So we play as Whisker Squadron, who is trying to save their galaxy from evil alien invaders while doing barrel rolls when needed. So this one's main hook is kind of the procedural nature. With similar to that of Race the Sun, the levels will kind of change based on very slight elements of proc gen. I don't know how far they're going to go in the finished version compared to the demo, but the different areas that you'll go to when enemies will show up should be altered, as well as the boss fights, that they were aiming for them to be procedural, essentially built out almost like mixing and matching the different parts to create whatever kind of crazy vehicle the game wants. Now, As a concept, Whisker Squadron definitely works in that respect. My main concern, again, is where are they going to go in terms of creating variants? In between missions, you can buy additional upgrades that will change the properties of your ship, but one of the big things about Star Fox was the handmade levels and kind of having the variety of missions along those lines, and I don't know if this game is going to hit that mark. But if you are a fan of Star Fox and kind of the arcade flying shooter style games, then definitely keep an eye out for Whisker Squadron, and there's actually several other games that are going to be similar in that respect. But definitely going to be excited to play this one and see where they can go in terms of this kind of roguelike elements. So with that said, we are going to wrap up this week's showcase here. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing. If you are a developer working on a game and you want me to take a look at it, please get in touch. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. And donations of $15 or more will get you acknowledgement in my upcoming book, with the due date for that, or the cutoff, January 10th of 2022. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And until next time, take care.